Hello. If we could please take some seats, we're going to get started here. I'll give it about 60 seconds. All right, so I'm going to get started real quick. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, who has never been to one of these before? Oh, wow, decent amount. Okay, so first of all, welcome to 1871. Welcome to the VRAR Chicago MeetUp. We've been running this event for 3-something years now at this point. I'm not really sure, but this is effectively just so you guys are aware of kind of a couple of things about how this is going to run. My name is Matt Wren. I'm the founder and the organizer of the event. We have a lot of people that help us do this, and they've kind of put in a lot of time and money or effort, so we're going to let them say hello for a few moments very quickly. But at the end of the day, this event is about you guys. A couple of things that you should know. Number one, there are food and drinks. Please have some food and drinks. Thank you, Insperity, for that. Second of all, when you are going to talk, because we're going to have a lot of open Q&A after we get through some very quick presentations and some introductions, please try to always talk into a microphone because we are streaming this. And if you don't talk into a microphone, the people who are watching online, and we know there are people watching online, they can't hear you. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Anya from Insperity so she can tell you who they are and what they do. And thank you, Insperity, for providing the food and drinks this day.
Hi everyone, I am Anya. I'm with Insperity. We are a corporate partner here at 1871. Full disclosure, I am like the bottom of the totem in my organization. I'm a sales chick, but I do have friends in high places in my company, and I sing a lot of praises to my marketing team. And to my marketing team, I have challenged them and raised my hand and said, what is our VR AR strategy going forward? My fiance Peter, who's way back there, hey Peter, he's a VR programmer, so I've been interested in the VR community for quite some time now. I love all of the implications that there are in virtual reality and augmented reality, mixed reality. I've had a chance to connect with these awesome companies like EX3 Labs and Bundle AR, and I'm just so inspired and excited for all the things to come from empathy building and training and development. I'm curious, so it is human resources. Who is from the HR community? Awesome. A recipient of human resources as an employee of an organization. All of us, awesome. So this topic really pertains to all humans who are resources within organizations. So Insperity, we are a full outsourced human resource organization. We do everything from hire to retire, the commodities from payroll and benefits to all the good stuff that I love, which is like the strategy, the development, really harnessing discretionary effort, which is like that extra juice of excitement and effort that we give as employees to our own employees if we're founders or if we are like me, working for larger organizations. So I'm just so thankful to be part of this. I'm really excited to see what our panel has to share with us tonight and all the questions that you guys have to offer. I'll be hanging around my table, make sure that you get our little webcam covers and our pop sockets and some Jolly Ranchers, right? Again, I'm Anya from Insperity. Thank you all for coming tonight. Turning it back over to Matt.
And up next we have Phil from 1871, who provides the lovely space that we're in.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hey guys, how you doing tonight? Thank you for joining us here at 1871. Welcome to my humble abode. We're very happy to have you here. 1871 is a place where you can definitely explore new ideas, build your dreams, launch your company, as well as grow and scale whatever idea that you have. So we're very happy to offer space to a very prestigious organization such as VRAR. We're happy to have and host you guys every month. Thank you to Insperity today for the food. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that's come. We cannot put on these types of events without the community, and we are very appreciative of you guys attending this event. So if anyone would like to get roped into the madness here at 1871 and learn a little bit more about what we do, feel free to come over to the 1871 table, grab a card of mine, shoot me an email, and we'll figure out a way to connect. Enjoy the day.
And up next we have John from Bundle AR.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks everybody for coming. We're in the back there. Bundle AR, we're very proud this first quarter to launch a content management system for augmented reality. We're trying to make it super easy for businesses and institutions to add augmented reality technology to how they communicate to their customers, their employees, their patrons, their students, their vendors, and so on. That became very important 2 years ago when both Google and Apple both declared at the same time that they were 100% in on augmented reality technology. They were going to make the hardware work for it. That was a big deal for us because sometimes out there you can't find the hardware that works across all platforms. And that's where Bundle AR is trying to bring augmented reality and make it easy for businesses and institutions to add it. Because we know both Google and Apple are all in, so it's going to work on your mobile devices and your tablets and iPads. At any rate, tonight you're going to learn a lot about HR and VR and AR and how it can impact your results with your employees. So have a great time and thanks for being here.
And finally, we have Charlie from the VR Association. And there he is.
That would be me.
That would be you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm here to tell you should join the VR AR Association. To do that, one of the things you do is go and talk to Matt Waldman right over here. He can help you with any questions whatsoever. The VR AR Association has over 50 chapters, probably about 5,000 companies and members at this point. They recently had a global summit in Vancouver, and attendance was up by 35%, so interest is crazy in this industry. As a member, you can be involved in a lot of things, including writing standards. A Chicago chapter member, Underwriters Laboratory, has just been involved in writing the standards for VR AR equipment. Members also get access to a directory, so if you're looking for work or you're looking for talent or anything involved in this industry, there are directories where you can see who else in Chicago is working on this. We have special events, special training. Last year we brought in Magic Leap for free Magic Leap training, which was nice, and we're working on talking to Microsoft to get the HoloLens 2 in here so you can get access to technology no one else is getting at the moment. We're partnering with various conventions coming up. Discounts are involved, there's training, so it's well worth becoming a member. We're glad you're here. We have events here. The Chicago MeetUp is the first Wednesday of every month, so I'm hoping to see you all here again. So thank you.
Okay, so I have to do one more thing here, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce our presenters, but I have to unmute one of them since he is remote. So there's Jeff. Jeff should be able to hear us now. Is the laptop up? Because we can't hear you, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff. But hang on, Jeff, you're not going to go first. I'm going to have some people in the room go first. And we're going to see who they are. Try talking real quick, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff.
Okay, so we'll work on the volume in a second. In the meantime, you are unmuted. Just be aware, but we're going to let everybody else talk. And this is who everybody else is. So we're going to start with any volunteers who wants to go first? So, okay, so sorry, just real quick logistics. Each of our presenters, again, this is about you guys. This is not about selling stuff to you. So they're going to really just do up to a 10-minute introduction about who they are, what their area of expertise is, what they do. And the reason for that is so that you guys kind of know who you should be asking questions to or what you should be asking about or what the different areas of expertise for people are. Because we have people who are HR experts that may or may not know anything about virtual reality and augmented reality. And we have people who are virtual reality, augmented reality people who may or may not know a whole lot about it, and various levels in between. So up first, I think I'm going to start with Andrea because you're the HR expert and this is the HR topic. So here we go.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm the non-techie person. I'm the HR person. Andrea Moran with Focus HR. And I am so excited about this technology because the implications that it has on training. You know, one of the biggest thing that employers have to deal with is after they hire somebody is getting them on board, having them learn about the company, the organization, their position in that company, soft skills, leadership, teamwork. I can go on and on and on and on. And this is an easy way, from the user perspective, not from the developer's perspective, to learn those skills and to teach those skills in a consistent way throughout the organization. I mean, I'm really excited. There's a lot of opportunities here. The first one that comes to mind, and I know it's already, I saw a sample here at the EX3 booth, is the new sexual harassment law that came into play starting on January 1st, where everybody has to train in sexual harassment. And from my experience, it doesn't usually happen within the company, it comes from people outside of the company coming in and causing the issues, and people really need to learn the tools on how to deal with that. And in a virtual reality space where it's more comfortable because you can play, act, and it's a great way to learn. It's going to be embedded. It's going to stay with them, and it suits all adult learning styles. So it's fantastic. I'm really excited about this. And ready to go.
You're handing off already?
Handing off already. That's me. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go the other end of the spectrum here with Adam, because we've done a whole lot with AR and VR, and actually a decent amount with basically she kind of teamed you up a little bit, so here you go. Fantastic. How's everyone doing?
More energy. How's everyone doing? Before I get started, can we give a round of applause to Matt and the VR AR Association and all the people that put that together? I remember when we first started, it was just a small group. In fact, I think we had one of the first ones at our office, our old office.
That was actually about 8 of them in.
Yeah. So just to see the fact that there's a lot of new faces here is phenomenal. My name is Adam Wisniewski. I'm the CEO and founder of EX3 Labs. We have a booth over here, but been a member here at 1871 for the last 3 years. Specialize in experience design and digital innovation. My background is human-computer interaction and user experience design, but I'm also a developer. Recently, I got acknowledged as becoming, I don't know how many Microsoft MVPs there are in Chicago, but I was awarded that this past November, which was a huge honor. Part of it was because of all the work that we do in AR, VR, and specifically the HoloLens. How many people have tried the HoloLens before? It's an amazing device, and we're super excited that the 2 is coming out. But we've had the privilege of building a lot of the immersive experiences. Andrea mentioned the first ever kind of sexual harassment VR training we built. We also built one of the first ever accessibility AR trainings, which showcases a gentleman who's a member of here at 1871 named Andre Johnson. And Andre, unfortunately, was the victim of gun violence and lost the use of both of his legs and is in a wheelchair now. With his permission, we spent a day with him, and we attached a 360 camera to his wheelchair. And we had a chance to experience what it was like from his point of view, how difficult it was for him to reach for something we take all for granted, just reaching for a plate in the kitchen cabinet because it was too tall, or trying to get his chair through a doorway that was too thin. And just learning some of the statistics around the housing availability and the challenges that somebody who's in a wheelchair has to go through, just finding housing and finding an apartment, because quite frankly, not all of the houses and apartments in Chicago are wheelchair accessible. And it's something we don't take for granted, but we really wanted to capture that in VR. We were able to do that and really help people build their empathy skills through those types of training. It's a privilege to be here tonight. I'm looking forward to answering any questions, but I definitely would encourage all of you to not just think about what we talk about today, but the ideas related to building out a VR, AR application. If you're in the business of trying to take advantage of this wave of AR and VR, certainly take advantage of it. In 2016, when we first started 1871, we launched it. I think the company was launched in April, May time period of 2016. And we weren't necessarily, we actually didn't start as an AR, VR company. A lot of people think that's all we do. We do a lot of computer vision, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, but we saw an opportunity and we took advantage of it. It was really that simple of us just saying, wouldn't it be cool if we could do X, Y, and Z? And we did it, and we're here today 3 years later. So super excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to all the questions.
And up next, we have Scott from Immersion Enterprise. And I wasn't going to introduce you as the newest member of the Chicago Chapter VR Association, but we actually had someone else join today. So someone beat me by 2 days. So here's Scott.
Hi, everybody. That's the reason I came tonight, was to be given the award for newest member, but oh well. My name is Scott McCormick, and my company is called Emergent Enterprise. And first of all, special thank you for being this new member and then being invited to be on the panel tonight was really an honor. And I'm really excited to network with you guys tonight and also to share some of the things that I know. So you have met the HR person, and then you've met the tech development person. I would be the strategy person. So if you were going to implement AR or VR within your companies, like in an HR context, how would you do that? Do it successfully. Because as you can imagine, technology like this is quite a transformative exercise within a company. You're bringing something to a lot of employees that have never even tried it and are not even sure what value it's bringing to their world. An employee's going to look at it of more like, well, what's in it for me? Why are we doing this? And so helping companies with that kind of strategy. And I see it as helping in 3 different tiers, and I call it the ACT connection, and that's audience. And so understanding and knowing your audience, your employees, in this case, and what their needs are, what their apprehensions are, might be, that sort of thing. It's a user experience exercise. So that's the A. Then the C is context. What's very interesting about these technologies, especially augmented reality, you're bringing the content that you need to share with them into their world, because they're putting these glasses on and they might be getting this information in their daily workflow of their lives. That hasn't really happened very much before. And so that's an interesting aspect of all of this. So A, C, and then T, technology. You're introducing a new technology with hardware and software, which works great when the vendor shows it to you. But what about within the world of your company? Your IT department is going to have very high interest in this new technology and why you're wanting to introduce it. How does it work within your security? How does it work within your internet access? All those kinds of questions. And so Emergent Enterprise tries to help companies figure out all those things so you can have a somewhat seamless and frictionless and successful implementation of this new technology. That's one part of Emergent Enterprise. The other part is a website. It's a tech news website called Emergent Enterprise, and there's a dash in there, so emergent-enterprise.com, that are stories about these very things: AR, VR, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, being used by business in the business world. So if you I do a post almost every business day of something that I think is relevant and interesting to the business world and how companies are using these amazing technologies to transform business. So thanks again for inviting me here, and I'm looking forward to answering some questions and sharing some things that I've seen that have been successfully used out there in the world.
Okay, and finally, last but not least, we have Jeff Metter. So you guys see who we're talking to. You see our hashtags. If you want to post on social media or live tweet or tag us, that'd be great. We'd love it. But for the rest of the night, you're going to be seeing Jeff. So let's see.
Lucky you.
Lucky. Trying to figure out how to full screen this, but I think it's pretty much there. Give me 2 seconds.
Let me know when I'm a giant imposing head for everyone.
You're a giant opposing head on the screen for everybody. Can everybody hear him? Excellent. Go ahead, Jeff. Introduce yourself, and then we'll bring the rest of the panel up.
All right, fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Metter. I'm with JMXR. And I'm here with 2 purposes, actually. First, Within the VR and AR Association, I co-chair the training committee. And so I work with a lot of different member organizations on helping them come together to really strategize how we're approaching enterprise level training from using immersive technology. And we do a lot of different things within this organization and within that committee in particular. Some of the things that we do include white papers on best practices, how do you train the trainer. These are a couple of things that we work on. We also do a lot of outreach, participating and partnering with a lot of conferences that are very training or HR focused to help bring sample technology and speakers to those events so that people who are outside of this world of VR and AR, those people get more exposure to this technology and they have the ability to put their hands on and put a headset on and really experience what sort of things are being able to be done there. We've got a huge event that's happening next month in coordination with Training Magazine. We'll be going to their conference, the training conference down in Orlando, and we've got a four-person panel, or four-person speaker series rather, 4 separate 1-hour talks that will be giving about case studies and how people are using this technology today within their organizations. And we also will have a demo area on the expo floor where people are going to be able to try this content. So we're really trying as an organization to take this content, take our member organizations and really do a lot of outreach so that more people are comfortable with the technology and understand what's going on out there so that they're able to make better business decisions about what's happening within the realm of immersive technology. So if anybody is interested in participating in those calls and helping out with the training committee, please feel free to get in contact with me. We meet about every other week, and we'd love to see you there. When I'm not doing that, I run a company called JMXR that focuses a lot on strategy for immersive design and and specifically how enterprises are using that for training. So I work a lot with top-level enterprises to help them look at their learning program as a whole and start to design programs that really take extended reality, both VR, AR, and MR even, and how do you start to integrate those into learning programs so that they become comprehensive programs. I cover everything from working on pilot projects through full-scale deployment throughout the enterprise. Work a lot within physical skills, but I'd say that my area of expertise has been with soft skills. I've done a lot of work with customer service. Recently did a project with HP that we presented up at the VR AR Association's Global Summit. We did a big diversity and inclusion program with HP where people learned how to use more inclusive language when running meetings. And this was all run through virtual reality. So really looking at programs like that and how they synthesize with other learning objectives inside the organization. I'm sure that this is one of the topics that we'll be touching on in a little bit, but this is really, the technology that we see here is something that is truly transformative, especially within the learning and development realm. I think that we're starting to see the definition of what's happening within learning and development within the enterprise, that's starting to evolve and change so that it's becoming a much more prominent role within the enterprise culture.
Okay, I think he's done. Alright, now we lost you on the third back. So Jeff, just so you're aware, your mic's going to be hot, unless you start seeing some sort of feedback. And everyone can see you on the screen. So I'm going to welcome everybody else back up to the stage. Take a seat. You can choose where. And we're going to see, so where's Ben? Ben, where are you? There you are. Okay, so see the guy back here in the gray shirt? Wave his hand around Ben. He will have one microphone. Charlie, you want to run another one for me? Charlie will be the other one who hopefully, oh, Matt's got it? Okay, Matt over here has the other microphone. So basically, the first thing I'm going to ask is, please talk into the microphones, again, so the people on the web stream, and so Jeff can hear you. And let's see who wants to go first. Who's got a question about this stuff? Nobody? Come on, someone be great. There we go. Microphone.
Adam and Scott. artificially intelligence backed up digital assistant and expected to be used successfully in HR, in a variety of roles. And I'm wondering how you saw the future of this developing. In other words, the combination of AR with artificial intelligence, the development of these sort of artificial helpers, so to speak. Where do you see this going?
So, I'll go ahead and jump in. With the project that I was describing with HP, we actually worked a lot with those digital avatars and artificial intelligence. And people were able to communicate and speak directly to artificial intelligence-backed bots. And the artificial intelligence would be able to not only respond to them, but it would also be able to evaluate what it was that they said against certain protocols that we had laid out throughout the process. So if somebody said something where there was a better way to say it, the artificial intelligence was able to interrupt and say, hey, you know what? You might want to try this approach instead. What's another way that you could phrase that? And so you're really starting to see artificial intelligence jump in from that perspective. It's being done right now. It's not very widespread. I think artificial intelligence from that perspective is still perhaps a little bit naive, but artificial intelligence is in leaps and bounds very, very quickly. So that's one thing that we've seen where AI has been used specifically with those digital avatars to build conversations and help with soft skills.
Yeah, and I think you're also talking about voice recognition and that usability. That's going to work on both platforms, both AR and VR. In fact, it already is. I was in my Oculus Quest yesterday using voice recognition. And artificial intelligence also is integrated, if developed that way, with voice recognition. So it's hearing what you're saying, matching that up with a very large network, a database of responses like you have given, and then replying, just like the avatars that Jeff's talking about, replying in what the artificial intelligence thinks is the highest probability accurate responses to what you're talking about. The voice recognition is also being used very much in what's called remote assistance. So let's say I got a job with an HVAC company, and my job is to go and fix air conditioning units on top of tall buildings. We could probably look out in the daytime and see some here. But when I go to the top of that building and I'm wearing a pair of augmented reality glasses, a subject matter expert can log into my glasses, see what I'm seeing, and start advising me on what to do, or I can just start talking to my glasses and it can tell me the right sequence of events to troubleshoot and then fix that particular air conditioning unit.
I think my perspective on it is, if you think about how many people in here have an Alexa or like a Google Home digital assistant, how many people pretty much, honestly, only use it to ask it like what time it is or like the weather? That's kind of the majority of it. I don't know what other tasks that you leverage from Alexa, but I think for the most part, most people it was pretty lackluster in terms of what it could do beyond just some of the basic tasks. And part of the challenge with any artificial intelligence system is the amount of data that is captured previously. So think about a company like Google, who's a market leader in image recognition and computer vision, is because they have this vast database, not only of searches that we've inputted from a desire standpoint or an interest standpoint, but they have the largest historical collection of images on the web. So when you look at an AI system that they potentially built, we talk about the glasses and being able to recognize things. The machine learning aspect of being able to see an environment and analyze it is the same skill set that you would want in an artificial intelligence system from a voice recognition standpoint. So I think your question specifically was kind of what's the vision of that, kind of how do we see that? I think any artificial intelligence system, especially one that's voice activated, has got to have a really strong repository of not just all of our collective searches and things that we're interested in, but it's hyper-personalized to our level of interest and hyper-contextualized to how we operate. If we went around the room right now and asked everybody what their morning routine is, I guarantee you we get a very different answer between people, from the time we wake up to what we wear. You know, it's interesting, on my walk to work today, it was 17 degrees or something like that. The amount of people that I felt weren't properly dressed based on the weather was pretty high. I mean, I have a low tolerance for cold, in fact, because I just came back from Bali, that felt pretty good to me, around 80 degrees. Coming back home, it's like shell shock. But I saw people walking outside today with no hat, no gloves, and they were walking around like it was 80 degrees outside. Everybody is different. Everybody's norms are different, the way they want to be communicated with is different, the tasks that they complete every day is different. Every artificial intelligence system has to correspond with more of a personalized, hyper-contextualized experience for every end user, and I think the best example that we have of that is something like Iron Man's Jarvis or Vision, right, where it feels like he's giving Tony Stark all of the information that he wants at that specific time that's very relevant. Google has their Google Home, which they touted was better than Alexa because you can ask it 2 questions back to back. Well, what happens when we get to a place where you have an unlimited amount of contextualization based on what you ask? And I think that's really where we see things going, especially in the next 5 to 10 years. Things that are going to change that have the most dramatic effect are 5G, because the information processing time is going to be a lot faster. If you look at something like 4G right now, if you were to download an episode of The Walking Dead, it's going to take a couple minutes to do that on a 4G network. On a 5G network, you can download not just one episode, not just one season, but the entire series of The Walking Dead in the same time period. So that's a game changer. And the back and forth bi-directional communication that you have with an AI system will correspond with that.
Sorry, I'm manually holding the camera so Jeff can see the stuff.
Thank you.
The other thing, Jeff, I want to let you know is I'm going to mute you when you're talking so that the feedback doesn't kind of cause your sound to come in and out.
Thank you.
So who's next? Here we go. I saw his name go first.
My question will be directed to Scott, but anyone can answer. Is just for my personally, I don't even have a smartphone until last year. I don't have a functional computer at home, so please laugh. But how if I want to try to learn something about implement a new technology from people with older generation like me and the new generation, what kind of step can be approached that people won't feel outdated, they are out of time, and they will try to accept, try it, test it, feel it.
So Scott versus all the others.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand your question. How can we introduce these technologies to somebody that might be a little apprehensive or just naive about it?
Naive or something that they don't even have that concept or something. Just say before we have a computer, mouse is something that you want to have a stick to kill it. Right now, mouse is something, just like grandma looking for a mouse, okay, they look at a stick. That's right at the time, but right now, mouse is totally different solving. So how can we introduce some kind of new concept to people based on the old concept?
Okay.
The older things are where you can try, like you said, if you not that people, old generation, they not just old, obvious, right?
Okay, great. Good question. It is an interesting introduction, especially VR, because VR literally takes you out of your present reality and puts you in another space. Augmented reality is a little more accessible and understandable because, and I know you said you don't have a smartphone, but we are all carrying augmented reality devices right now. And we might even be using augmented reality in different ways. If they had some kind of experience with Google Maps, for instance, and using it in downtown Chicago and to get from one place to another. Google Maps has just added, within the last few months, an augmented reality component so that you can, have you ever walked outside of a building and wanted to understand how to get someplace, and you saw some directions, but you weren't sure, do I go that way or do I go that way? And it's just confusing. But with the augmented reality component now in Google Maps, you can hold your phone up and hold it down one direction of the street, and it will show some arrows that you are in fact going in the right direction. And then, interestingly enough, once you start walking, it stops working. Why is that? Because it becomes very unsafe if you were to start using augmented reality and walking down the street looking at your phone, because you're probably going to step off the curb and in front of a bus or an Uber driver. But there's a great example of augmented reality in our everyday life. So people get to see how it works. It lays information on top of the world around you, on top of the world of what you can see, and it's very valuable. It helps me to achieve a goal in my everyday life.
I'll show you guys that. Yeah, one thing I'll just add to that is a wonderful story I heard about George Bernard Shaw, who was celebrating his 80th birthday. And his grandkids were running all over the place. One of the youngest grandkids came up to him and looked at his grandfather and said, "How old are you?" He said, "I'm 80. He said, I don't think I could ever live to be 80. And George Bernard Shaw replied, "That's because you never did 79. And I think what the point of that story is that some people think in that very linear fashion where you have to go to this step before you can reach the next one. I think it's a tremendous advantage that you have by not having some of the digital baggage that probably a lot of us have. If you go to a different country, some of them didn't have access to computers, so they jumped directly to smartphones, and they're more proficient with smartphones than we are, because they don't have the baggage of us thinking about how to type on a regular QWERTY keyboard, from a touchscreen perspective. So I think you're at a tremendous advantage. The fact that you're here tonight speaks a lot as well, but one thing I would definitely encourage anybody who's interested in getting more information just on their own self-paced dime is YouTube for sure, but also Lynda. I don't know if you've heard of Lynda before. Lynda's an online resource, LYNDA, I believe, where you can learn all of these different technologies kind of at your own self-paced learning. It's a great resource for AR, VR.
Yeah, just the other thing I'll add too, and it's one of the use cases, not necessarily HR related, but one of the use cases I've seen a lot of is for people who are locked into a retirement home. There are actually a bunch of different companies now that have applications where they bring, like travel experiences through 360 video into retirement homes to take people who can't physically go to the places that they grew up maybe, or that they traveled to in their youth, and bring it to them. So again, it's one of those ways of the technology it's doing something relatively simple, just 360 video, but it's also kind of bringing the outside world or an experience that somebody doesn't have the physical capability to actually go experience anymore, and they now have the ability to do it because kind of the technology is being brought to them, as opposed to them having to own a device or having to, be proficient at computers.
And I think that what folks have said here is really that augmented reality has got an advantage from an adoption rate, and that's absolutely true. There's just such a smaller barrier of entry to something where it's looking through your phone, which is something that people do when they take photographs anyway. That's an action that people are used to, versus something like virtual reality where you need to put on a headset. To get down to brass tacks and talk about a couple of ways to make virtual reality more accessible to people, so, especially from an enterprise training standpoint, two things that I've really learned over time is, first, if you're introducing this type of technology into your organization, from the get-go, you should make that an opt-in, that's something that people opt into. It's an opt-in activity. Don't force people into it very quickly. Allow the word of mouth to spread. Virtual reality is at a significant disadvantage in that it has been around for years and years, and I have never heard anyone explain it in a way where people say, oh my gosh, I absolutely get it. The same way that they say, oh my gosh, I absolutely get it once they put on a headset. There is that barrier where you really do need to put on that headset in order to understand how this technology is effective. The other thing that has been really effective in helping with adoption rates is to give people the opportunity to acclimate to the technology. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're running a training or some sort of collaboration tool or something within the enterprise that is involving a headset. And don't have them put on the headset and immediately get to work in there. People like to explore. Give them that opportunity. If I see that there's a hammer there, the first thing I'm going to want to do is pick up that hammer. Let me do that. I'm going to throw the hammer then. Trust me, I will. Let me do that. But give people a little bit of opportunity to explore and acclimate to the technology, and they're going to be much more receptive to anything that they see down the road in terms of having to perform certain tasks or learn certain tasks within that environment.
Yeah,
I'm going to put a few moving on, but I
Okay.
saw more hands go up. So we'll go back to the room, and then you got a hand up there, so Ben, right in front of the friends. All right, go ahead and back to the room first.
Thank you. I'm very excited by these kinds of new technologies and how it can help improve our lives. Personally, I'm more interested in how these sort of new technologies be used to address the many social injustices that we have in our society.
Could you repeat that question, please? I couldn't hear.
Can you talk?
It's on. Just
Can you talk about how these new technologies can be used to address the many social injustices that we have in our society?
So the question is how the technology can be used to address social injustice issues. Go ahead.
I haven't gone to it yet, but I know one of the most powerful VR experiences is in Los Angeles at a museum there, that when you put on the VR headset, you experience the life of an immigrant trying to make their way into this country from Mexico and all that happens within it. And just like the EX3 experiences there, that where you gain an empathy for somebody that is going through something like that, is very valuable to the user as they see it from such a much more powerful way than just reading about it or even watching a video or movie about it, when they are actually living it in a virtual reality experience.
We've seen quite a few scenarios either that we've built or that we've seen, one of which was around de-escalation of police scenarios. So you can imagine simulating an environment where a car crash just happens, and all of a sudden you see, two of the people involved. One gets out of the car, the other person gets out of the car, they're in each other's face. Freeze frame, virtual environment, 360. Now you have to react to that as a police officer and how you would handle that. As it relates to social injustice, you start talking about the empathy building and how that translates to a more intelligent, more thoughtful way of going about police interaction with the community. I think this has implications on HR too, because there's a lot of scenarios in the workplace. I wish we all would get along from a coworker standpoint, but the reality is there's always conflict. As we go to more of a global society, you do have a lot of coworkers that might not look like you. How do you actually understand their perspective and their cultures and their norms and get a little bit more involved with that? There's also economic scenarios where you can kind of take a day in the life of somebody who, let's just say, grew up on the wrong side of the tracks or the right side of the tracks, quote unquote, and understand what it's like, especially for children. A walk to school for somebody who may live on one side of town versus another is very, very different. One kid might have to walk 2 miles. They have to kind of make their way home or to school through crime-ridden areas versus another kid who maybe get bused to school or actually have their parents drop them off, and they don't have to have any of those issues. All of the grass that they experience on the walk to work, to school is completely green and everything is glacial and all of that. So I think there's ways to not only just build empathy, but also address some of the economic disparity challenges that we all face based on a lack of perspective.
I'm gonna jump in, and I'm actually gonna put you on the spot, Andrea. Because bringing this back to an HR topic, social injustice. I mean, it's an issue not just in terms of like society, in terms of social injustice, but in the workplace. Clearly, it's a big issue. One of the show of hands, who has tried EX3's video training here so far? Whoever doesn't have a hand up right now, go try it. Because when you're a 6 foot tall white guy, you might not know what sexual harassment feels like. But if you want to know, experience it in 360 video. You get that cringe factor that, again, it's just something that you would experience. And so when you start to talk about, with other issues such as racial, or again, different abilities because of possible handicaps, or these are all things that it's very hard to train. These are not skills that are easy to train outside of having experienced what it's like to kind of be in someone else's shoes. And VR and AR actually put you in the situations where you're in those shoes. The other thing, and the reason I want to toss this to you and point this out to you is it's like, okay, so let's, I'm not an HR expert, but I'm in a position now where I have to interview people and I have to hire people and I have to be sensitive to a lot of these issues. What other situations am I not thinking of that are specific to HR?
It goes beyond the, what I call the packaging, what you see on the outside. Is people forget that all of us are individuals, thankfully. We all think differently, we all see things differently, we interpret the world differently through our own lens. By the way we were raised, what we've experienced in our life. So sometimes even when somebody looks like us, doesn't mean that they're going to see the world like us. And what I've been seeing more and more in the workplace is there's a resistance in general to want to understand the other, right? Okay, let's face it, it would really be boring. Could you imagine? 3 million people in the city of Chicago all thought the same way. Awful. So we have to start learning to appreciate those differences and see the value in those differences. It's always been a challenge. It will always be a challenge. The more with the AI especially that gets developed and allows for different scenarios and gives people a safe environment to test different things. It's like, well, let me just try saying this just to see what happens. Trying different things or trying to figure out what's the right thing to say and saying it one way, well, okay, that didn't work. Well, let me try this way, did that work? So as this technology develops and becomes more mainstream, because right now it's for really big companies, and that's great, but some of the small guys need it too. So once it's more widespread, I think the impact it can have at work and outside of work in our society is tremendous. Although you still need people open-minded enough to want to do it, and giving people a try, and not saying you have to change anything, because people are resistant to change. It's even if it's just doing something is 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3. People are going to be resistant to change, so you have to give them an opportunity to experiment, to try it on their terms.
We have one in the middle of the room, and then we're going to come, so middle of the room, then Matt. Here, and then
This question I think is for you. When you implemented your first VR HR program with a client, what were the barriers to entry and what type of program was that?
I'm going to hand it off to these guys. I haven't had the opportunity yet to implement that.
Yeah, so for us, I think that the main thing was just outside of what the client, a lot of corporations have a bit of a blind spot to the actual cost. VR and AR development is a little bit more akin to game development than traditional software development, because there's 3D content development, 3D environments you have to create in. Operating on the Z-axis requires a different set of skills. So if people aren't used to that, there's certainly the understanding of what the cost is. The companies like Bundle or AR make it a lot more simple because now they're prepackaging some of the content the way that's distributed. But I think one of the things that definitely came up, especially early on, is how do we scale this from a technology hardware standpoint? Software is, once you build it, it's relatively easy to maintain and distribute, but what's the hardware implication? That's why AR has been probably more widely adopted than VR has, and why a lot of the metrics you see online are over-indexing on AR, because everybody has the device types that Scott mentioned on their phone to be able to render an AR experience. So hardware cost is definitely one. We're seeing that come down quite a bit, but think about something like a Google Cardboard, which allows you to turn your phone into a VR experience. The other big scenario is, and this is something that often gets overlooked, is just the accessibility within corporations themselves. So, anything related to the legality of a VR experience. Every time we run a VR simulation at a corporation, typically we have a bottle of water, there's disclaimers around seizures and things like that. That was a big concern early on based on the frame rate of the experience, because it could potentially cause a seizure. Thank God we haven't had that experience at our company, but some of just the general legal disclaimers about the experience themselves, some people can get a little bit disoriented depending on how that happens. So those were probably the two big ones. Other than that, though, I think there truly is probably a general fear that this is going to be so heavy we can't do it. Our organization just can't do it. It's not as difficult as most people think.
Yeah, I highly recommend, if you were introducing this within your company, doing a prototype, something small, and because when you do something like this that is change, and people are resistant to change, a lot of stakeholders within the company are going to take notice. Everybody from management to, like I said before, IT, even legal. Many of you come from industries that have regulations that might be involved, like pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing. Even branding might be interested in how is this going to reflect the brand. Training, they might want it to, if you're doing some type of training, maybe it's onboarding in HR, it needs to link into the learning management system, because we need to record that this person has gone through these certain steps of onboarding into the company. So there's all these stakeholders that have an interest. So a prototype helps them see what it's going to be like. It helps iron out different problems that might arise in a full-scale implementation. Not only just one location, but if you're a big company, then scalability is really important for any type of solution. And you can answer a lot of those questions and solve a lot of those problems with a smaller prototype that you can keep your arms around, but helps everybody see what you're trying to achieve.
And the other thing along with that is to really make sure that you have some sort of measurable result that you're working towards. Understand, before you begin the project, define what sort of metrics you're really looking at, so that you can say, this was successful in this way, here's where it didn't meet our expectations in another way, but really be able to understand how those numbers are working together. I've seen some people, and I've been involved with projects like this as well, where you have some pilot projects that don't have as strict metrics, and it makes it very difficult to get that project to move on to the next phase, because you don't have something that is measurable that's behind it. So at all times, really try to find something that is measurable. And you can be creative with what it is that you're measuring and how you're measuring, by all means. But make sure that you've got those defined before you begin the project.
Sorry, the other part of that question was, what's the first project you've done? You can't hear you.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, the other part of that question was like, what was the first project you've implemented, like with a company? If they say, hey, we have 5 things to do, what's like the easiest one to start with? Or the best one to start with, so they understand how this really works and they get a full experience?
Go ahead, Jared.
So the first project that we did was with a hotel chain. Really focused. Do you mind muting the computer? I'm getting a lot of feedback. All right, I think I can mute here as well. Awesome, thank you. The first thing that we did was with a hotel, and we worked on customer service for a very specific situation of what happens in a hotel restaurant when a customer sits down for breakfast, but their waiter doesn't show up, and the host or hostess comes by instead. What happens, and how do you get that person a cup of coffee? First, let me say, I never in my life thought that it was so complex to take somebody's order. I've never worked in food service. How difficult it to take somebody's order and really get all of the nuance of that order down. And so we built this great conversational matrix about how to go about take that person's order and communicate it properly to the server. That was the first project that we did. It was an ambitious one. It went very well, but I think one of the problems that we had with that was the problem that I just told you to look out for, which is having something that was measurable there. Because that is more of a soft skill, it is something that doesn't have a very tangible metric behind it. We can start to look at things like customer service scores, etc., but we didn't have a strong plan in place prior to implementing this. And this is our first project. But that made it very difficult to continue a conversation with senior leadership to say, hey, look, this is something that was really successful. We had a lot of anecdotal information that showed how successful it was, but without those metrics, that made it very difficult to continue that conversation.
I think from an HR perspective, the easiest ones to implement are ones that, one, have strong business value for us. Initially, it was with recruiting, making sure that it was this whole concept of the war for talent, which makes it increasingly difficult for organizations to hire because it's so competitive. One of those areas of competition between companies is the work environment and all the perks. So being able to record a 360 video of a day in the life of what it's like to be at an office space, especially if you're recruiting outside of your state, is exceptionally helpful and pretty easy to implement.
Real quick, just show of hands. How many of you guys work for, I'm just going to call them large companies. I'm not going to make you expose which one it is or anything. Okay. Did that hire like people straight out of college significantly? How many people have experienced the whole kind of shock that comes from being somebody fresh out of college and it's like, oh, now you're actually working and have never done it before? Like you've never done an internship, you've never been in an office environment. You're just, I mean, it's a shell shock, right? But a day in the life video might make something like that a lot easier. And again, it's one of those things that when people come to me and ask, hey, what's a good use case for VR? It's not one of the first things that comes to mind, but it's a really powerful delivery and it's a really powerful use case. Sorry. Go ahead. Anyone else wants to jump in?
Another similar use case to that is something that Ford has done, where they have produced a day in the life videos of their customers, because it was really important for them to make sure that everybody on the assembly line, it doesn't matter if you're in charge of designing a car or installing the windshield wipers, they wanted everyone to understand who the customer was and why these cars are so important to them and what it is that people are really responding to. And so they created these day in the life videos of their customers and had their employees do this so that they understood the relationship that the customers had with the brand, had with the product. And that was something that was really successful for them.
We're going to try and keep the questions rolling. We want to get, I know there's a lot, I've seen a lot of hands go up. I want to make sure we get to you guys.
This question is really directed at any one of you. But today we talked about a lot of the use cases and a lot of the benefits, which I think there are many and there are endless use cases. But just wondering, longer term, whether you see any unintended negative consequences or drawbacks, and if so, how have you thought about in building today some of the mitigation for that?
So I'm actually going to throw you under the bus again on this one first, because more to the point, obviously those of us who have been working in tech, we hear about a lot of the quote unquote unintended consequences, but I want to hear what the worries are before we get to some of the things that we've seen.
Always the biggest worry when you're your training, especially in a virtual environment, is how is it translating to real life? You know, it's are people taking the training seriously? You know, there has to be, you know, as discussed, there has to be a goal for the training. We don't train just for training's sake. There has to be a goal for that. And then you have to see how it transfers over to real life. To me, that is the biggest concern, is that transition. Because in a virtual environment, you can play a little bit, you can push the buttons a little bit, you can maybe do things that are, you know, you can try things that maybe you wouldn't do yourself just to see what kind of a reaction comes from it, or what are the negatives, you know. And people have to then remember that when they're in real life, they got to stick with the right way of doing it, you know, and especially when it comes to with interacting with others. You know, so to me, that transition is the biggest concern.
And along with that, I think becomes a data privacy issue. As you're doing things like this, how is that data being stored? So if you are, you know, I think you're absolutely right to say that people use this opportunity in VR as a safe space. It is something where they can try things out, like you said. But if people are trying things out in, say, a sexual harassment scenario, do you want all of what is recorded there to be available that might be in a hacked, it might be able to be hacked somewhere, and you might be able to say, oh, you know what, here's what the CEO was saying during a sexual harassment scenario. You've got to be really careful with some things like that, and people are starting to get really concerned about what is being tracked, what is being kept, especially as people start to bring up biometric information as well, and starting to change scenarios, having the artificial intelligence look at biometric information to change scenarios. That's something else that really starts to get a lot of people concerned about this.
So much so are people getting concerned about it that Illinois does have legislation on AI and how it is used and its destruction of data, you know, once an employee leaves. If an employee asks for those records, if the recording of an AI type training or a VR training, if they want that to be, if part of the training is recorded, not the fact that they've ended it, they've answered the questions correctly, that they've learned it. Illinois is one of the forefront states in asking that you have to have your company or your provider has to have a policy on data destruction and what happens with that data and the storage. If it's being used in a pre-employment situation, like AI for interviewing, there's certain things that the company has to do or the provider of the software has to give the company so the candidate knows what's happening, what is to be expected, and what can happen to that information. Biometrics has been in place since last year. There's also the same concerns. AI just started this year. So there are already, in Illinois, legalities like that.
That's awesome.
Augmented reality glasses have brought in some interesting scenarios that were never intended, obviously, by the manufacturers. And so if you're wearing AR glasses, say Google Glass for Enterprise, for instance, and you can wear that the entire day because they are very lightweight, easy to use. There were recorded instances of people wearing them into the restroom, and these glasses can take video. And so misuse of the technology, that was never considered. So you do have to think about the ways users might decide to use them that you had never thought of. There's lots of other roadblocks like cost, scalability, in the VR world, things like latency and even the kind of disorientation we talked about, but the benefits highly outweigh the roadblocks for sure.
Yeah, as I say, the one thing that I'll say, just again, because I was a psychology major, so I kind of get a little excited about some of psychology, is that learning in a virtual environment is the closest thing you can have to actual physical learning somewhere. You have better retention, you have better, quicker processing, quicker take-up of topics, and also better retention after the fact when you learn in VR. That's really cool. It's also really powerful in that if you're gonna, say, train on harassment, and you put someone through something that is traumatic, or could be traumatic, you have to be aware of the fact that you're putting somebody in effectively a physical situation that could be traumatic to them. It's just one of those things that you kind of got to think about as you go through the development cycles. That may be the question. Up front here.
Yep. Hold on, sorry.
Hi, I want to ask you all as forward-moving vets a question that I've been thinking about a long time. I'm becoming a XR Unity developer through CircuitStream, and I've been thinking for a very long time, what impact on society do you think by 2050 there will be through the way augmented reality and virtual reality can reduce the cost of equipment that you need in order to develop muscle memory and skills, thereby democratizing expert skills, especially if, like, imagine a scenario where a first-generation child of Mexican immigrants working at McDonald's goes home and then is the world's best player at the Jeff Bezos simulator. Like, once anyone can become excellent at physical skills rapidly, what society do you think we'll live in by 2050?
Seems like a very general question, but anyone want to take it?
I mean, what we're seeing, this is actually happening with some of our clients. So we had a big event, I think it was in November with Rio Tinto. How many people have heard of Rio Tinto before? Rio Tinto is like a $47 billion company. They're based in Australia. They do mining, so they do mining of different materials and minerals, diamonds, and copper. One of the things that they mentioned, especially in certain mining engagements and projects, instead of having a physical driver in the actual construction vehicle, these big mining tanks that they actually are manned remotely. And I think we'll see a lot more of that, where you have somebody who kind of mans a robot or an autonomous vehicle remotely, and that could translate to a lot of different scenarios, whether it's hospitality, construction, of course, manufacturing. I think we're starting to see a lot of those use cases. So I think it's tough to say when that time horizon is, but I think it's fair to say by 2050, a lot of that is going to be augmented.
One of the things I'll bring up, I've brought this up before, and it's an example of a surgeon. There's a surgeon, again, sorry, I feel apologies to the surgeon who actually did this, but he used to train by playing video games before he would go to surgery. And ultimately, he created kind of like a little remote simulator to train on the surgery that he was about to perform. And so they got so, like, this became such a good thing that they ended up having a competition where he had a bunch of surgeons actually trying to do the surgery on the simulator. Then they taught a bunch of 13-year-old gamers how to do it. And the 13-year-old gamers outperformed the surgeons. And one of the doctors, of course, says, well, that's great. What happens when something goes wrong? Okay, so obviously you can't, like, there's a level of knowledge, a level of expertise that has to be there before just performing some physical motions can become a real thing that you do. In the Rio Tinto example, that's great as long as everything's performing great. What happens when one of the machines malfunctions? If you have someone who just knows how to operate in the perfect conditions, they're not going to necessarily know what to do when things go wrong. So I don't think you're going to have a complete replacement of people who can become experts overnight. But I think we'll see a lot more of it. Absolutely.
But in reality, you would make a multiplayer hospital game so that you would be able to reduce error.
And yeah, that'll all come as well. So sorry, I didn't. Again, for now, I'm just saying in the near term. So go ahead.
And another way of looking at that also is who's got access to this. One thing to think of is, what does research in outer space look like right now? If I'm a scientist, let's say I've got some great science behind me, I can't go into space and do these experiments that I want to do, but perhaps I can do them in VR with a robotic arm that's up in space. That is now, it's not exactly democratizing, but it is moving towards that, what that space research experience is like, where we don't need to send, we will still send scientists up to space, absolutely, I'm sure, but we can make more access available to people who do not have the very specific, very extensive space training needed to go up there. So if people need to do that in space, in deep water, or in a variety of different environments where they don't have access, VR or AR, probably more VR, could give people access to those remote spaces where they don't have access right now. So that's another way to look at answering your question.
I would just say one thing. 2050 is 30 years from now. And the way technology is evolving, by that time, if we're still here, there probably will not be very many sick people because of genetics and CRISPR engineering, that sort of thing. Most diseases will be taken care of. We'll have different problems like overpopulation and, well, entire countries burning up, that we'll have to deal with. And these technologies that we're talking about will probably be gone. There's already technology that responds to brain waves. It's being used right now where you're essentially working a computer with your thoughts. And that's now, 30 years from now. So we'll be completely wired, completely connected to each other in ways that we can't even think of right now.
And I mean, to put this in perspective too, let's talk about a couple of firsts that have taken place. Again, I'm going off stories that I've read, so I can't. Somebody just diagnosed by watching a YouTube stream. Someone just diagnosed one of the astronauts up in space. Like there was a medical condition, there was something going on. Somebody watching the live stream basically connected with NASA and did a diagnosis. I believe, and again, I'm probably butchering what actually happened there, but I remember seeing the story. Jeff, I'm not sure you might remember who was up in VRIRA because they just had the first virtual reality remote diagnosis of a medical condition, and it was by one of the companies that was up at Global Summit. And he's the guy from Canada. He's one of the guys from Canada.
I don't dispute it, but I wasn't there for that conversation.
But they had basically a radiologist viewing stuff in virtual reality, remotely diagnosed a medical condition, and they acted on it. I don't remember exactly the details, but I can find out. The same company actually is working with the Canadian Space Agency, and they did a test of a virtual reality headset in a simulated zero-G, which is, I guess, done in the jet, where they take you up and then dive them so that and they have video of this, the guy in a virtual reality headset completing a task where effectively everybody else on the plane is just kind of floating around them. So, like, this stuff is coming, and it's coming really quick, and it's a lot of use cases that I don't think or at least a lot of us, are ever going to experience in our lifetimes. I don't plan on going to space, although it'd be really cool. But yeah, 2050 is a long way off.
By the way, it's 1990 now.
So we have a question here. Yep.
Yeah.
Microphone, please.
Sorry. I think this was kind of related to one of the earlier questions about the abuse. I was thinking from the point of view of a law enforcement, they could use virtual reality to kind of get into the minds of criminals, but then again, about deprogramming the criminals, I can also see like the empathy portion to like if you're a victim of child abuse by somebody who's a criminal abuser, you may be able to look from their point of view, although it may be difficult to kind of for an adult to actually look at a child's point of view directly because a child can.
Do you have a question?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking about the abuse points and kind of like how will you kind of prevent somebody from going becoming a sociopath or a psychopath by experiencing something from a point of view of one of those two types of people.
Okay, so this kind of gets back to the putting somebody into very serious traumatic situations in a virtual environment, because that does have a physical effect on people, it does have a physical mental effect on people. Do you have any answers to how that gets?
I don't know specific scenarios of kind of the deep-rooted kind of mental illnesses, but what I can say is I think there's a lot of use cases, especially given where we're at as a society. I'm always fascinated, especially from a problem-solving standpoint, how you can reduce the number of anything that might be happening as a negative consequence of where we're at as a society, one of which is suicide. it's hard to imagine, how the rate has increased this much, but I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be in high school with social media. I don't know if you all think about that, but so imagining having all that scrutiny and these expectations, and I know there's a lot, especially implications with people's physical appearance and kind of the imposter syndrome and looking at Instagram and everybody's fake life being exposed. And I think there are scenarios of VR trainings or simulations that potentially could help with that. I don't, again, the deep mental illnesses, I don't know just personally of any scenarios where that's been explored, but I think there's some serious implications around mood changes. We have seen that, especially in hospitals as it relates to people that are going through some type of illness. The escapism concept, where you can take somebody to an island if they might be terminally ill or something like that, where you can alter their mood a bit based on the negative situation that they're in. But I think there's some promising areas.
Question over here, Matt.
Thanks. I'm trying to get a better understanding of how this is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Used in the HR context. And what's the threshold of companies, what size companies are using this? Like I imagine it's too expensive for smaller companies. So what size are the companies using it mostly? And do you envision going forward that it will scale down to the level where smaller companies have access to it? And then, sorry, the third part is, if so, what's the best use for the smaller companies? Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Did you want to start?
No, it's just the question makes total sense.
Okay. First of all, I think a small company can take it on. You can do something very easy. I'm gonna mention a product, and they don't sponsor me or I don't get anything out of it, but it's called Zappar, Z-A-P-P-A-R. And I think you still get a free account. And basically what you do is you create icons that you can print out of your printer that you already have, and you could put them up around the building. This has already been used. I read about Papa Murphy's using this as sort of an onboarding technique. And part of the onboarding was a person to go around the office and learn about the different departments and maybe meet some people, that sort of thing. So they use Zappar and put these icons around, so there might be one on that post. And then you download Zappar's free app on your smartphone, and then you can walk up to that icon with your phone, and it uses the camera to read the icon, and then it either pops up a little bit of information or it launches a video, that sort of thing. So it becomes a very simple augmented reality onboarding solution. As far as scalability goes, the cost of everything is coming down. For me, the entry point was the Oculus Quest, which I think we had one over here, didn't we? Yeah. So I know $400 is a lot of money, but being able to get a standalone, you don't have to have, this is a VR headset, you don't have to have a separate computer for it. And you can do things like get an app called Wander, which costs $10 on your Oculus Quest VR headset, and then you can go anywhere in the world that has an address. It actually doesn't have to have an address. You can go in the coral reef, you can go in outer space. It's basically Google Maps in VR surround. So that would be another thing if you had a new employee and you wanted them to see every location of your global company, they could do that in a VR sense. So you have to get creative, but I think both of these platforms are very accessible to do some really cool things, even if you're small or maybe have a small budget.
I'm waiting to see if Jeff or Adam's going to jump on this before I answer.
Oh, no, I I agree with what you said. I think I think that you don't look at the size of the company, you look at the value of the training that you're bringing in. But you bring up a really good point. There are many, many different products that are out there that allow small companies to create their own materials using handheld devices that people already have to create AR experiences. And I think that's a great way for people to get started.
Was there a third part that we didn't answer?
You know, I don't remember. I think you basically gave me what I'm looking for.
I mean, to answer, like brass tacks on cost, how much does a 360 camera cost now? Which a low-end 360 camera is about $150.
Yeah,
basically. You can create very useful content on a very cheap 360 camera, and you can deliver it on a mobile device. So if you want to talk about like what's the actual cost for a small company to see benefit from it, $150 and some time.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot you can do very cheaply. Again, it really, it really goes a lot more into the what are you actually trying to train, how are you going to measure whether it was good, and yeah, kind of thinking more about actually thoughtfully creating the content around it more so than, a lot of people in VR, they think that they have to develop this full-scale, like giant virtual environment with all this AI around it, and no, you can do a lot with just 360 video. And you can do a lot with very simple VR environments that don't even have to be very realistic. I had a question in the back here, Anya.
Thanks. So just a general topic. So something that just inspired me. So I think about myself too, or my colleagues, being in like the tundra of Chicago winter. We don't have the luxury of going out for a nice walk around the city because we're just battling the cold. I love the idea of wander and going through a simulation, kind of anywhere, whether I'm scuba diving virtually or exploring space or even just walking through Poland. So I would be curious to hear, do you guys have any experience with your client companies in regards to any kind of that inspiration, recalibration when it comes to especially mental health? Just taking that mental break. I know that one of the themes in the last 5 years from my friends in commercial real estate, they've mentioned that a lot of buildings are creating those meditation spaces where people can just kind of quiet out, recalibrate. But I'm curious, have you seen or created those types of environments or encouraged your clients to implement something like that? And then also on the more analog mode, with Andrea, is that something that comes up with your own clients as well, where people just need to take a step back, and whether it's just find a little bit of quiet time for inspiration to work on that next project or tackle the next thing on their list, or even for like a de-escalation type of a situation.
As far as the analog goes, yes, we see that a lot, especially in open workspaces. People are getting to be, they've been shown not to be as productive. The whole teamwork, has its limitations because people aren't getting that quiet time. So people are creating, either leaving offices open, that doesn't belong to anybody, so people can go in and close the door and escape, or like phone rooms, where they can just go and have a call. Depending on the building that they're in, because even with smaller companies, if they're in larger buildings, sometimes there's just wandering the hallways. People are definitely recognizing that people need those 5 minutes away from everybody, the noise, the hustle and bustle, the email dinging every 2 minutes, and all the rest. Very much so.
We've worked definitely on those types of meditation spaces, whether it was projection technology or AR, VR, especially with the, I think just getting away from everything is a big concern for most corporations, especially working demanding hours. One app that everybody should try is, I don't know if you've heard of the Calm app. They've got a great mobile app, but they actually released their VR experience, I believe, in 2019. It's on Oculus. I think it's a free app, but it's pretty cool. You should check it out.
And that's very accessible for companies too, right?
Very accessible.
They're getting a headset,
That's
plugging
right.
into.
Yeah, I mean, Oculus Go, I think it's $200. You can get a couple of those. You download the Calm free VR app and put it in a room for people.
I don't know of any instances of companies actively encouraging employees to use a meditation app, although there are plenty of meditation apps or these kind of calming apps that are out there. You are seeing it some within a medical environment, though, where people are using those meditation and calming apps to help with patients who are getting some sort of treatment, whether that is just, hey, I've got a fear of needles and I don't want to get this vaccine, or people who really do need some strong pain medication. They're using some apps like this that are reducing people's dependency on pain medication, specifically opioids. But that's getting into a different topic.
If you have questions, you guys gotta kind of flag people down a little bit ahead of time. I know I saw a couple more hands up. Yeah? You kind of hear. Are you actually gonna raise it? There we go. Yep. That mic's turning the microphone off over now.
Like in addition to the example of the sexual harassment training, I'm just curious if there's other examples of using AR, VR to sort of advance diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace, since that's been such a hot topic in recent years.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that we've done a project with HP specifically about inclusion and diversity, specifically how people were able to run meetings in a more inclusive manner. So what sort of language are they using? What sort of language are managers using as they run a meeting to make sure that they are treating everyone fairly and giving everyone the opportunity to be heard there. This was something that was run entirely with voice, so people carried on a conversation with an AI-backed avatar. And this was designed to work directly within an existing program that HP was running about diversity and inclusion. So there was a set process of how people were going to be engaging with the VR element of this. They would start by going to an overarching seminar that for 800 people or so that taught some of the basic concepts. Then they would go break out into small group sessions of about 30 people, and then they had the opportunity to opt into the VR experience, and we let it be an opt-in experience. But they opted into the VR experience where they would go and review the materials that they learned within these other two segments, but also have a chance to practice their skills. And one of the things that we saw when we were doing this was people were very slow to respond to the digital avatars, but in a good way. People would start saying something, stop, correct themselves, say, oh, you know what, there's another way I could say this. We had people who were thinking before they were speaking. This is a success. This is exactly what we wanted people to do. We didn't quite know how to measure that, and that was just this unintended consequence that came out of this. It also threw our AI for quite a loop, because people would say half a sentence and then say, oh, no, there's a better way to do this, and start again. But from what we were able to ascertain from watching them, from some exit interviews afterwards, they were stopping and thinking about what they were doing, because they wanted to make sure that they were approaching this in the correct way. And what was great about that was, one of HP's bigger concerns going into this project was they had said, we've done a lot of work with empathy and really getting people to understand that bias is a thing, and language matters. People understand that, but there's a next step. Now that we understand that there is an issue here, what do we do about that? How do we practice that? And that's why we developed this module specifically for them, so that they would be able to practice those skills with these digital avatars. We were really, really pleased with those results from that task.
I think one of the things that we see, especially now, because Dr. King's birthday is coming up in a week or so, but a couple years ago we did the first ever 3D hologram of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. We actually showcased it here in 1871, CBS was here, it was a pretty big event, but since we did that, there's been quite a bit of requests that come in, especially around this time, to showcase that type of civil rights 3D experience, so people that live through those moments in history can and really didn't live through those moments could actually see what that was like. And I think there's a lot of implications around employee resource groups, because there's a lot of these employee resource groups that get stood up, whether it's based on background or race or religion, whatever the case may be. I think it's important that every organization has a platform for individuals to be able to share commonalities and be able to communicate and have some open dialogue. The other thing I would say is that there's a lot of implications, especially in HR, around implicit biases that in uncovering some of those scenarios. We talked a little bit about it with accessibility and sexual harassment, but one of the apps that we created, probably the most popular, is something called Look Who's Talking. And essentially it presents the user with a series of faces, and you hear a dialect, and you have to guess which dialect belongs to which face. And it's an incredible experiment. It's a gamified experience. It's really fun, but it's really thought-provoking because a lot of the things that you wouldn't realize, there's one specific scenario of a woman who is wearing a burqa, and what you don't realize when you select on that person, once you hear the dialect, is she actually has an Irish brogue. And Ireland has one of the fastest growing Muslim populations. Most people don't know that. It's just something you just don't realize. And I think it uncovers just some assumptions that people have regardless of what your background is. And especially when you can gamify it, because these are difficult topics to talk about, and they're difficult scenarios to think through. So I think that's one use case for sure.
I'm trying to see if I see hands up. All right, so I'm going to throw this one out in 1 second, just for, to the panel here. In terms of an HR, so we've talked a lot about training, and we talked about different types of training, particularly sensitivity training. So I want to get away from that particular topic and say, okay, well, what are the other big uses for VR or AR in an HR perspective? So basically take, recruiting, take onboarding, take termination. And sorry, I'm actually, this literally just popped in my head. What's the George Clooney movie where they're like firing people over the internet? Thank you, Up in the Air. Okay, so trying to seriously, but termination is part of HR, or, it's not like offboarding people, I don't know what you call it. But think about some of the other potential use cases, whether you've seen it or not, where this technology really could be beneficial to an HR situation.
One of the ones where I know that people are using it from a hiring situation is very specialized cutting machinery. So this happens a lot in cranes that deal with moving heavy equipment around. There are very few certified, trained, expert crane operators out there in the world. And so if let's say a port needs a crane operator, they have to sometimes look overseas and fly somebody in to the port and have them and test them on the equipment in order to say, okay, yes, you've got the skills that we need in order to be able to hire you here. Sometimes they fly people in and not only can they not operate a crane, they can barely operate a shovel. And so they really are using VR now to pre-test people to make sure that they've got some basic qualifications that are needed before doing any sort of extensive interview, especially one that involves travel.
I think one that we've seen, it's a little bit more morbid, but I think it's necessary based on the culture that we live in now as an active shooter scenario. Last year we simulated a robbery in a 360 environment, and you had to react to it and go through a series of questions. And the reality is that's the world that we live in. I think it's fair to say that probably most individuals and corporations are underprepared for a situation like that. So being able to not only just be able to walk into a room and understand where exit signs are, et cetera, and where you would go in the event of something happening, whether it's a hurricane or an earthquake, whatever the case may be, but an active shooter scenario, which obviously is.
And yeah, you can generalize that to any sort of emergency response, like a fire or a hurricane or a flood.
Okay. I think the the understanding skill sets really can change now because of augmented reality. So if you do have certain jobs open that require a certain skill set, and in the past, you needed to find somebody that had all that knowledge internally in their brain. But now, with augmented reality, if they can get information as they do the task, they don't have to be as qualified as a person in the past. So really, you could put a person that's interviewing for a job in the very scenario of, okay, I'm going to have you wear some augmented reality glasses, and I want you to follow the instructions on repairing this piece of machinery, and then see how they do. They may not have much background in repairing that kind of machine, but they're very good in that augmented reality scenario, and they might be a great hire because of that.
The training possibilities are endless. I mean, in manufacturing, for example, like I have a client that is, like most of manufacturing, it's very automated. You know, so they just have a machine operator just to make sure that, you know, everything goes the way it does. So as long as everything's running smoothly, it's great. But what they run into issues on is the troubleshooting, when something's not quite working correctly. There's one person who can definitely fix any of the machines, and another person who's starting to learn. But if you could actually give people like a VR scenario to start troubleshooting situations without actually having to do it on $1 million piece of equipment, what a benefit. You know, that's what, imagine an electrician learning how to be an electrician without electrocuting themselves, or a plumber not causing a flood, or, you know, you can just go on and on. Leadership skills. There's so many different areas. I mean, a lot of training that's being done, stand-up training, for lack of a better word, can be put into, you know, into a VR situation.
And I think, in addition to that, if you look at the augmented reality version of this, one of the things that's really being done right now is because you have so many people who are strong knowledge holders within an organization that are reaching retirement age right now, and they're going to be retiring within the next 5 to 10 years. How do you start to preserve that knowledge within the organization? Using augmented reality in a similar situation where you have say a junior plumber going out to a site, being able to tap into the knowledge of a senior plumber who is able to view their workspace through this augmented reality headset and provide them guidance through that. That's a great way to start to build this institutional knowledge so that it doesn't rest just in people who are going to be retiring soon. This is a big problem for a lot of organizations of how do they keep that knowledge within the organization.
Yeah, knowledge drain and retirement. Folks that are retiring is a huge issue with a lot of companies. How do you retain that knowledge? What format, what way, how do you transfer it down to the others?
I want to throw one out there just because we've had to go through this. You know, I'm an executive level at a startup company. We have to do things now like you know, retirement accounts and benefits and healthcare and all this stuff. That I'm sorry, but as a developer, this is not exactly my area of expertise. But it's now, you know, we're an employer. We've doubled our size of our company in the last year in terms of employees, so we have to offer benefits. And I remember being an employee who had to go through the understanding of those benefits, which was painful or difficult, let's put it that way. And I mean, you know, simple things that, again, people haven't necessarily thought of is, listen, this is a real simple, real easy way to add value. If I'm an employee who's starting and I need my benefits options explained to me, like this is honestly the use case that I want to see, because frankly, I'm somebody who has to now explain this to my employees, and it's not easy because I don't really understand half of it.
Use your broker.
I see Anya back there waving her hand.
Yeah, no,
you can do that for you.
One of the easiest ways to do that, which is a little bit, you know, on the lower tech side, is just videos that explain it. And I'll be honest, there's some things, you know, benefits is a great example of this. You can explain something to everybody up front and they look at you and they're like, I got it, I know exactly what I have to do. They're healthy for months, everything you told them just got lost, and it's like, okay, I had to go to the ER, how does this work? And until you actually have to use it in a certain way, you're not gonna understand. But video is an easy way to start that. It's gotta be kept basic.
I completely agree with you. I am going to give myself a shameless plug with Insperity, but also I'm going to share the love. So Insperity partners with a Chicago-based company called Jellyvision. So I am Amanda Lanner, self-proclaimed #1 superfan. I write her love letters all the time. So Insperity partnered with Jellyvision to implement their AI tool called Alex for their benefits integration. And it's made my life easier as an employee. I've made better benefits decisions through that technology. There's video that comes with it, so totally agree with you, Andrea, on that. But just the algorithm that comes with it. I mean, I was way overinsured. Insperity doesn't cover all of my benefits as an employee. I have skin in the game too, so both my employer and myself were saving money because once we rolled out the Alex tool, I was able to start making more educated benefits decisions for myself. It just takes you through that series of questions of, what did you do last year? What do you expect to do this year? And a lot of times, it's just that default. Myself, I was like, well, I'm going to be responsible and take the lowest deductible possible, and that's unnecessary. I didn't even hit that lower deductible. So then through that algorithm, I was able to realize that, okay, I'm way overinsured. Let me save money. Let me save my employer some money. So I think that, yes, definitely that kind of technology helps. And especially, insurance is a very complex thing, especially in the US. Honestly, it's the least favorite part of my job. I sell a bundled HR solution, and fortunately, unfortunately, part of that is the insurance piece. And in America, it's like we got a lot of work to do around that. And there's a lot of education, and employees feel embarrassed no matter what tenure you're at. I have CEOs that's like, so tell me the deductible difference and the out-of-pocket maximum. I don't understand the difference. And it's like, that's okay. But when we have that kind of technology to support employees or even employers and make them feel less, inadequate with their knowledge base, I think that's huge, because not only are we helping our overall healthcare system, we're just empowering these employees to feel like, okay, I know where I'm at with my benefits package, and if something does happen and I need to go to the ER, I understand where I'm at. But again, when we have these tools in place, it definitely makes for a much more educated decision process and utilization of what we have available as resources.
I'm going to see how many more questions we have out there. Otherwise, I'm going to say let's get back to some networking and actually trying demonstrations out, because you learn more by trying this stuff than you do by hearing us talk about it. Anyone else? Last chance? No? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to say thank you to our panel. Thank you. I'm not sure how you found us, whether it's through the VRA Chicago website or the Facebook or one of the posts, but pretty much everyone's contact information is available. If you can't find it through one of the invitations or our website, just feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty easy to find, VRARchicago.com. Jeff, I'm going to go off your face for a second here. This is my contact information. I'll leave this up for the rest of the night in case anyone wants to get a hold of me. I'm going to say thanks to Jeff, and I'm actually going to let you go, so you can let the microphone
Thank
go.
you all.
Cool, thank you, goodbye. And then thanks again to our panel. Thank you to Insperity for providing food and drinks tonight. Definitely the one thing I will say, yes, especially if you haven't been, I always ask this and I didn't ask today, who hasn't been in VR before? Come on, someone raise their hand. Okay, cool, if you haven't, treat this like Fight Club. Now's your night. There's a headset right there. Because seriously, you will learn more about this by trying it than you will by talking about it. So next month, we're hoping to have actually a really fun topic of TV and film. We'll see. I don't think we have anything confirmed yet on the panel or what the demonstrations are going to be, but we have had some TV and film people around in the past, so hopefully it'll be some good connections. Hi, Scott. I see someone who has connections to that industry here. That said, sign up with the VRAR Association email list to find out a lot more about what's going on in the industry. There's a ton happening right now just because CES is going on, so you're going to start seeing a lot about VR and AR news over the next couple of days. In addition to that, this event is once a month. Feel free to come back for those of you who haven't been here before, because there were a bunch of hands up I saw. Trying to think what else I'm missing here. That's it. You know what? I'm gonna let it go. Please stick around, network. If there's drinks left, grab some drinks because they're paid for. Thank you, Insperity. Check out the demos by Bundle AR because in terms of training and just-in-time delivery, it's a very easy way to deliver it. And thank you very much to you guys for coming out.
Yeah, please, I'll get you a flyer and sign up.